So, uh, what I thought would be sort of
We're
a couple
live.
things to talk about is
We're live.
the
We are
what?
live. We're live.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't do an announcement. So,
Yeah, there's nobody here yet, so we can talk a while. At least I don't see anyone. Um, the hang on, let me make sure it's working. There we go. Yeah, it's working okay. I'm not sure how these things are broadcast around. Um, what I wanted to kick around was something you said. First of all, about the accuracy of your, what was it, 6498? Is that it?
yep,
Okay, it's got the small seconds down at 6 o'clock.
that is
Oh, what a
correct.
beauty! Yeah, I can. Let's see. Hang on. That's the other end of mine. Cool.
Nice.
Anyway, that movement is a clone, actually, of a 6497, and it cost me all of $30.
Nice. Well, and if there's one, the Chinese do a pretty decent job at impersonating or imitating. There was an old joke saying that Italians make the best lovers, and then scribbled underneath it on the wall was the Japs make them smaller and cheaper.
Okay, hang on. I'm going to put up a quick message here. 1 sec. All right. Let's see. On live now. Why? How do I do this? Oh, boy, I'll just do it right here. And here we are. Let me see. Hey, yeah, I got everything working. I can't put something in the chat for me if you would.
Okay. I put, hey guys.
Oh, okay. I'm not seeing it.
Well, yeah, so far joining us is Big Bad One Man saying hello. Blue Shirt Buddha, we say howdy here. Charlie P. Hi, Bill. Greetings from Belgium. Vladimir tells us good morning. And Vladimir
good.
also tells us yo. Okay. Presumably, Vladimir is not from Belgium.
All right. Well, that's good. I have on my group chat, and it's apparently I've got to turn on my other thingamajig to see everything.
What I found the best way is to open another window and then click on your own channel and then click it. And then, but when you do that, make sure you kill the audio or the video from that. So it just pulls up as the text window.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay. All right. Well, anyway, so let's talk about that. Is that first of all, really, what are the reasons that people collect watches? I mean, I was thinking about that, and what I like to do is it's a way to learn about them, and especially is that they're so expensive that you can't just go out and buy them like you'd buy comic books or something like that. Well, comic books now, I guess they've gone up in price too. Okay, so why do people do that? I mean, what's going on?
Well, actually, I kind of owe this one to you because I did a search on eBay just looking for the 6498 movement. It's just like you've mentioned sometimes people, different manufacturers will use different movements. And sometimes if there's a movement you like and you want to go do a search for the movement and see what's out there with it.
Okay. Well, this is still my mystery watch. This was the movement was by a guy named I forgot his first name. His last name was Jacques. Jaequet, and he had a company called Jaeger-LeCoultre. What he was, his company was an assembler. They would buy watches from ETA and assemble them in different ways and do different things with them. And so when I showed this one to a guy who really knows this stuff, he's a guy I know who's a master watchmaker and also a former Grand Prix d'Horlogerie judge. He said that's not an ETA movement. Now, this guy knows stuff, and I've learned better than to question him because he knows what he's talking about. So I guess is that to me that's the fun part of it. It's a big mystery. I got to find out how this watch was made. Now, as you know, this guy had to go to jail. He's out now. And by the way, for Rolex fans, you'll like this. He was making phony Rolexes. He had another guy stole a bunch of gold cases from somewhere, and then they were putting together some fake Rolexes and selling those, and they finally caught him, which is sort of interesting because this guy, and of course he said he was innocent, and there were a whole bunch of other people involved too. One guy from Ulysse Nardin and another one from oh boy, I don't think it was Minerva, but something that sounded like that. So here to me that's the fun of collecting watches, is to find out as much as possible about the watch and learning all about them. My Parmigiani, that's how I found those. And the interesting thing to me is the movements that Michel Parmigiani makes. And then finally, we come full circle, and this is in a case and it'll fall out and everything. This is my first enamel dial, and it was put together with an ETA 6497 clone, and this cost me $30, which is, for the movement. It was in fact the dial cost more, the $50 dial. And so, the thing about that is that to me this is part of collection, is doing stuff, having fun with it, not just trying to browbeat everyone into doing things your way.
Was that a Don Haynes reference?
I'm sorry?
Was that a Don Haynes reference?
No,
okay.
Not at all.
Just want to make sure.
Don is just enthusiastic. He sees something he likes. Get this. He get it done. I was trying to talk Don into H. Moser, and he says, "Well, they don't have the minute hands, and he's got to open a safe." so with a time lock, so he needs the minute hands. I said, "Use your phone." So yeah, he's got a different view of that. Don's a lot of fun.
Yes.
Okay, so why do you collect watches, Clyde?
Well, the funny part is, I almost think one of the things no one ever talks about, I think in the hobby, you learn about as much of yourself as you do about the watches. You go in with one set of ideals or a philosophy or preferences in your head, and then you go in and start collecting and start experiencing the watches, and you find out you're a different collector, maybe even a different person than you thought you were. I think a lot of it is the style and the aesthetics. A lot of times I love the history of watches. I do have a love of vintage. And sometimes it's just a matter of checking out what everyone else is talking about. That's Rolex. I can probably say it more than you can.
You can. You definitely can. I don't know. There's, that's to me. That's sort of. I don't want to call it it's just a side of watch collection I'm not very interested in. I'll put it that way. But I know other people are, and so that's good.
Exactly. But and the funny part is that, and again, I've got my phony Flieger, and it's got a 6498. It's a 45 millimeter. It's an UR B or B UR, which means the minutes, the hours are on a separate, smaller circle inside the minutes, with seconds at 6. A lovely little minute. Big onion crown, manually wound, so the big onion crown makes it really, really easy to turn. So you can even do so with like in a flight suit. It was developed by a company in the middle of Europe, or a country in the middle of Europe that was kind of going through a little political turmoil. I think that's probably the best.
That could be a lot of places.
Okay, well, okay. There was a country in Europe with a little political turmoil. It was technically taken over from a guy from another country, a neighboring country.
Crimea?
Austria.
Oh, Latvia.
Austria.
Oh, Austria. Okay.
Yeah,
Austria.
yeah. So anyway, they had a great need for a lot of watches for the military air arm, their air force that they were developing in violation of treaty. They needed a great deal of watches very quickly, so they came up with the B UR and the A UR. And it was basically, and the story was that we need something quickly, and we need something dependable. We need something that can be worn over a flight suit. So we will take quality hand wound pocket watch movements, slap them in a big case.
See what happens. You start talking about aviation watches, and you can hear what's going on outside my window.
Exactly.
They heard you.
And so we need a bunch of these quickly. So to me, it's a great iconic design. I like the B UR just simply because the aesthetics of it. It's high and the dial is pretty much dead on. Now the original ones would have been 55 millimeters. This one's only 45. And about the fact that it's PVD, whoever put this together decided to use a PVD case and crown. Of course, they didn't have PVD in the mid to late 1930s, but primarily what they used at the time was plated base metal. So it would be chromed brass, because steel started becoming in short. So philosophically, it kind of fits within the original watch. In a lot of ways, it's it's more true to the original spirit of the watch than what's being made now by Zen or IWC, for instance. So all the watches like this are basically homages to the original military watch.
Okay.
And like the original military watch, nothing on the dial. No political symbols. No, not even any manufacturer case. Not any manufacturer. The only way you could get one of the original ones, which go for 5 figures now, is you'd have to look on the case back, or maybe some cases even inside the case back, to see who made it.
That's called a sterile dial, when you don't have any indication of the maker on it.
Right, exactly.
This is my sterile dial. This is from Torby. They were the only ones that had any kind of enamel dial, and so that was what I ended up getting.
I was going to ask if it was enameled, because I think you've been talking about wanting one.
It is enameled, right? And so instead of paying $3,000 or $4,000 for an enamel watch, $50 for the enamel dial, $30 for the movement, and another $30 for the case, and I'm all set. It's sort of like something to do while I'm saving up for what I consider to be a really high craftsman watch, and in this case, it's the Frederick III from Lang and Hein, and that's so you got to do something other than going out and buying watches. I think what you're doing with the history of them is really cool. It was, hey, listen, Latvia wasn't a bad guess either. Come to think of it, they got taken over twice, from the east and from the west.
Actually, 3 times, from the east, then from the west, then again from the east.
You're right. You're right. That's right. Yeah, I forgot about I forgot they were one of the original treats that Hitler gave Stalin on on that. What was that called? I forgot the name of the alliance. Anyway,
Brest-Litovsk? No, that was the end of World War One. The non-aggression pact of 1939.
Right, that's the one. That's what I was thinking of. All I was thinking it was a hunk of Poland, but that was another part of it too. Yeah, I think it's important to know the history, because in the history, you find out, you have context for the watch. The other part of it, sort of, I guess, what some may consider the nerdy part, is the movement itself and playing around with it. I may have destroyed this movement, because what I wanted a watch with just hour and minutes. I didn't want any seconds, which I don't use anyway. And rats, where did that come from?
Well, anyway, I bought it for the style and because the fact that it had a unitas movement. But then the icing on the cake was I started realizing, I take it and I wind it every day. And I've had it for a couple of weeks. And this thing is dead. I've not had to adjust this thing once in a couple of weeks. This thing is dead on the money. It's just like, wow. So, actually, in a lot of ways, the cheapest watch I have is the most accurate.
Now, that's another thing. Let me tell you what I did that was sort of fun. This is my other, this is the other dial that is partially taken apart. Is that this is the listening end of a time grapher by Frederick Constant. Okay, and so what I did was that I put this guy on Frederick Constant, and it was about, I think, 12 seconds fast. And so I poked it with a little peg stick, and the little arrow that's on the regulator,
right?
All I had to do was just move it a little, and now it's under 1 second. So now that's another fun thing to do. Now, again, you can really wreck your movement playing around like that. And so while I'm in the sort of the playing stage, you might say, what I've got to do is to, be very careful, but I've also got to use cheap movement. I wouldn't dare touch any of my good watches as far as monkeying around with them. But that's a nice thing about certain types of movement. The other thing that's neat about the 6497, 6498 ETA is that they were, and this is another funny thing, they came out in 1950 as pocket watch movements. Now, in 1950, I don't know, who was wearing pocket watches back then. That was, just didn't seem to be a pocket watch time. Maybe they had I don't know. I was saying making stopwatches for horse races or something, but it's nothing stopwatch about it.
Well, Bill, they did have elderly people in 1950.
They had what?
Elderly people in 1950. Elderly people, the aged.
Okay.
The people that had grown up wearing pocket watches, they didn't all, they all didn't go to wristwatches. Some of them continued to wear pocket watches.
Okay. I was, and again, it's Swiss. So what may have been happening in different parts of Europe, I don't know. But I'm glad they did it, because now that I like the watches around between about 38 and 42 millimeters. And so that it's a nice big one. But the real reason I like them is I was working on a Sellita 210, which is a little bitty clone of some ETA. And man, I tell you, that is really hard to work on. So when I started, when I was able to disassemble and assemble the 6498, it was like, working on a big clock. And relatively speaking, I was been messing around with it, trying to get it ready for, monkey with it. And they're still pretty small. But a lot of fun, though. That's the whole thing. Is that when watch collection ceases to be fun in some manner, shape, or form, it's just not something I want to bother with.
Right. It becomes more of a job, an unpaid job that costs you money.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Well,
So,
one of the things about this, and again, one of the things about this one, I like the 45 millimeter size. The original ones were 55 millimeters, and I think that's a little big even for me.
I didn't realize that. Yeah, that's that is a big watch. One of the things that you'll find if you decide to try to make a watch yourself. First of all, there are, how do you say that in German? The flight watches, Flieger or something like that?
Flieger? Well, I don't know. That's really a question that should be given to Caseback Watches channel, because he is German. But I've always heard it pronounced Flieger.
Say again?
I've always heard it pronounced Flieger.
Fliegel?
Flieger.
Flieger, right?
Flieger.
Okay. There are the thing I found out is that there are a number of Flieger cases, and so I was thinking, well, that might be fun. Is that go and again, I'm sort of sold on the 64, 98, 97, and so that's a lot of fun to play with. At the same time, it's something that as the more I play with it, the more I learn about working with that particular movement. And like I said, I like the nice big ones because, well, another thing too, they fit the case better. Somebody was asking me earlier today about a Zodiac Seawolf, I think.
Yes.
Super Seawolf 53. And so I took a look at it, and it's got this little Sellita 200 in it. And the Sellita 200, after working on that 210, I was surprised how good the Sellitas were, and they're not bad at all. And I think they're fairly robust movement. But the thing of it is, that thing I told him, it looked like a BB at the bottom of a coffee can. It was so small relative to the size of the case.
Well, also my understanding is Sellita originally was a parts manufacturer for ETA. A lot of time they were making stuff under contract. I think I remember reading this maybe on a place or two. And
they were. Right. Yeah, they were. They had ETA couldn't keep up with the demand, and so that was one of the things that Sellita did. And also too, what had happened, I think, Sellita actually did the development for the clone, and so they were sort of like, because the patent had run out, and so they were there and they did it, and so ETA said, hey, why don't we hire these guys or subcontract them so we can fill our orders? So yeah, I think that if you're happy with the way ETA does things, I don't think you're going to find, at least I haven't seen it in the Sellita. Now, getting an ETA to give you the difference, the guy that I've been getting what they're called ST36s. This is the Siegel clone of the 64, 97, 98.
Mm-hmm.
But the ETA to get a real one is $75. And that's a heck of a good deal. I mean, for one like that, because a lot of them, I've seen them up to $300. So that, it's sort of fun to, because the more you do that, you realize that God knows what the manufacturers who put them in watches and charge $5,000 for them are paying. It's probably a lot less than what a hobbyist, like you or I would pay.
Right. Well, and the funny part is, I've also got a seagull movement myself.
In what watch?
Well, it was a Kickstarter watch, and it's called an Aramar Long Beach chronograph. And basically what I heard is that Aramar kind of had people, they were like an third intermediary between more conventional brands like Steinhardt interacting with the representatives and officials of the Glorious People's Republic. So in other words, if they wanted something Chinese made, they would be on the ground talking to people, getting the stuff, getting the contracts and everything done. So it's classic Panda dial. Kind of, in my opinion, the watch face is kind of bland, but acceptable. 38 millimeters, rather large, but kind of in a traditional size. And it's got a Seagull ST19 movement on it.
Oh, wow, that doesn't look bad.
No, as a matter of fact, and the interesting story about the Seagull ST19 is it's not, they didn't take it apart and copy it. They didn't try to reverse engineer it. In 1960, in the early 1960s, the Venus was winding down production of their 175 movement, hand wound vertical column wheel movement. The Chinese Air Force, and they were wanting to fund their next movement, and they didn't have the funds because this is before Swiss watches became luxury status symbols. The Chinese Air Force came along in 1963 and said, we will buy that movement from you. So Venus not only just gave them a license, they gave them the plans, they gave them the tools, they gave them the dies, they shipped it all off to China, and then they used the Chinese money to start developing their next movement. And since 1963, the Chinese government, and especially Seagull, has been steadfastly working on it, and improving it. I think they may have actually even added a couple more jewels to it. But I've actually had a couple of watchsmiths around who have worked on the 175, and I don't have the picture just readily available, or I'd show you a picture of the authentic next to the Chinese version of it, and they were really impressed with the movement. As a matter of fact, when I was posting pictures just of the movement, hell, people were thinking it was a Lange. They were thinking it was like...
You know what that looks something like is a Valjoux 22. That's, of course, Valjoux was one of the many movement companies that was bought by ETA, or taken over by ETA. Actually, probably most of them were actually saved by ETA from oblivion. And at one time, Valjoux was considered to be really a fantastic movement. I've got a Valjoux 84, I think, in my Beauvais Monoraptor Pont, and that that movement, that whole watch is just an incredible watch. I took a lot of heat because it looked like the hands were reloomed, but they probably were. But that watch is really a very interesting one, and the Valjoux 84 is simply, I think it's a Valjoux 22 that they popped on they put on the Monoraptor Pont and a separate little hairspring that they set up for it. Sort of like a Remontois Égalité.
Well, yeah, the Valjoux 22 is an interesting movement because they literally made it for 60 years. They continued to refine it and tweak it and make improvements to it. But I think they literally made it from 1917 to 1972. I've got a Hoyer chronograph from the mid-1930s with a Valjoux 22 in it, with one of the earlier examples.
Oh, that's cool. That's neat.
But one of the reasons why I went with Aramar over than the 1963 model, which is what the Chinese themselves were saying have been selling to us, is Aramar is like, we know these guys, we're going to have our own person on the ground to ensure quality control. We're also going to have a watchsmith. They didn't just drop ship it from China. They mailed them all then to the Netherlands, where another watchsmith over there went through, did more quality control, made sure that they're doing their job. And the watchsmiths looked at it according to the original. He said the finishing is not quite as well as the original Swiss, but they were damned impressed. And so we're talking about now. So I basically got a Swiss designed, if not Swiss made, manually wound vertical column wheel chronograph for under $500.
Yeah, I know. That's if a lot of the really good watches I have, excuse me, when they need a service, they really need a service. Both of my FP Journes were off in many different ways. But once they had the service done, they were like a new watch. And they still do. They keep perfect time. And the biggest problem I've had, I try to rotate them so I don't have to, if it's a 5-year interval or a 3-year interval or whatever they want. If I use it every other day, then it's a 10-year interval instead of a 5-year or a 6-year, whatever they have. But man, I tell you, those watches are hard to keep off, and because I like wearing them so much. This guy, this big old Culpa, this has been. I keep wearing the thing. I keep putting it on every day, and I'm concerned that I'm gonna wear it out. I mean, and by that I mean, I've got these other watches that are just cooling their heels in the case. So that's that's another thing is that what do you like as far as the watches to wear? If you're really after precise time, at least in my opinion, get a quartz, because you'll get precise time all the time. In fact, on my Fitbit, if I push a little button here, it'll give me the time. So I don't even, but I don't like looking at that. I'd rather look at my Maurice Lacroix or my FP Journe or my H. Moser or my big old Culpa here with the Robin's Egg blue dial. And knowing something about it, knowing something about the people that made it, makes it fun. I mean, that's to me is the exciting part. As far as good accuracy, yes, that's important. But knowing that these watches were set up for servicing, okay, this leads into another argument that I don't want to get into. But that is sort of an ironic kind of enjoyment, I guess.
Well, yeah, and like I said, the same week I got a watch that cost thousands of dollars, and I got one for a couple of $100, and it's like I'm really, really enjoying the one that cost a couple of $100.
Yeah, I know what you mean. This one, I got a heck of a good buy on it, and this one too. After pestering the guy for about 5 months, he finally caved in. The poor guy. He didn't know there was a vulture outside of his window. But I got these watches I really like, I really enjoy. And the Maurice Lacroix was my biggest surprise, because I thought, when you get a watch, it's really not that well made, and you know how they feel. They just don't feel right. They feel maybe a little tinny or something like this. This thing is it was really great. And then I talked to my my friend, the former judge, the former Grand Prix judge, and so he tells me, he said, they're really a good watch, and I didn't realize that. Even though they they do now. They make their own movements. And the reason I got this one was that it had the Jacquet movement in it, not because it had one by Maurice Lacroix. And again, this goes back to your thing about the history of knowing the watches.
Right. Now, The only thing, the only thing about this, the 6498 movement, is that of course the 6498 doesn't have hacking seconds, or you can't stop the second hand when you pull the crown out all the way, which makes, yeah. But other than that, it's pretty much the closest thing to a Flieger from the 1930s that you can really find.
Here is something that would be a fun thing for us to do as a project: is take a 6498 and get a second stop for it. Wouldn't that be cool? Put the second stop in, because this is exactly what not Tourby, but well, Tourby does it. But who's that other one that we were looking at?
Thomas Ninkrantz? No, that was the first one.
Right. Yeah, his stuff. He puts in a second stop. He also puts in a swan neck
regulator.
And the thing about a swan neck is that you take a little screwdriver to make the adjustments. Man, I tell you, that beats a pegwood stick any day of the week. So that was another fun thing.
Well, the funny thing is, I've got a friend that has kind of an esoteric taste in higher end watches, and he wants a Breguet so bad he can taste it. God, he wants a Breguet because the style and the heritage and the. But basically he's like talking about like, oh, I want an enamel dial so bad. I said, well, you could go to Tourby, and you could get an enamel dial there with the Breguet hands, and literally with a Swiss movement for a fraction of the price. And it's pound it's, but he's just like, nah, it's not a Breguet.
Yeah, no, I'd rather. In a way, I understand that. It's like what I would do is first get a Breguet and then go get the Tourby. So I want to either that or try to do what I'm trying to do. This one, I'm getting the leaf hands for, but it's got the Breguet numbers on it, and it's got the enamel dial. And there's a number of different ways I can go with it. I can get another one and put Breguet hands on it, and then have my Breguet version. Get a different color case. You know, there's all kinds of fun stuff to do.
You see, my approach, I'd be the opposite. I would try out the Tourby first for $1,000 or even under, and then see, do I like the style of watch? Do I, does it bring me joy? Does it bring me contentment? Then if I look down at the everything, it's just like, God, this is one of my favorites. Then I'd consider the Breguet.
You know, they're having a sale there now. You see, the Tourbys are at Thomas, Chris?
Ninkrantz?
Right. Yeah. They're having a sale, €800, down from like 1,500 or something like that. And these are like demonstration models. They're pre-made. They're like the display models on the floor. Normally with a Tourby, I understand you order it. You pay the money, you order it, they make it, and then they ship it to you. The nice thing about the Tourby watches, on the sale watches, they're already made. They may have been on a few wrists, so Don Haynes will not buy one under any circumstances unless he gets a replacement strap. But unlike everyone else in Tourby, you won't have to wait like weeks to receive it. Hey, speaking of Don, I was talking to Don about Longines. He's like Longines. Mm-hmm. And there's a really interesting thing going on with Longines and ETA. They've made a movement. They've got a watch that's coming out. It's already in Europe. They're coming out with a U.S. version called the Hydro something or other, or I forgot the name of it. But it's really a very interesting watch. But to me, the interesting thing about it is that both Longines and ETA are both owned by Swatch. So, but Longines goes to ETA and says, "Look, this is what we want in a movement, and we need it. What amounts to a bespoke movement. And would you do that?" And I said, "Sure." And so they end up with a movement by ETA that's made just for Longines. And so now you've got this sort of like, well, maybe maybe there's something about that movement that's special. And the watch is going to sell for, I think, around $2,000 or $3,000. It's not, it's not like a real expensive watch. But I thought that was no, wait a minute, it's selling. I think it's like either 1,800 for a NATO strap or 2,200 with a metal strap that's coming out sometime later this summer. But Don and I were talking about that, and the one that ETA is modifying for Longines is one of their standard ones, and I don't know, I forgot which one it was, but it's a really interesting kind of development, I think.
Well, the funny part is Don Haynes, as we know, is a movement nerd. But one of the things he especially said is, if you flip this, I call dibs. Just simply because of the movement. So it's kind of interesting. So, but in a way, the conversation with this other fellow who may or may not be Asian is that people approach things from different perspectives. And some people like the heritage. Some people like the snobbery. I don't want to say snobbery, but the exclusiveness of it. They want the cachet of the brand. And other people are a lot more functional. It's just like, I want something with that looks, and that's a good watch, but it doesn't necessarily have to have a brand name on it.
Yeah, again, I don't know what branch I fall in. They said Will Rogers once said he never met a man he didn't like. I used to be that way about computers. I never met a computer I didn't like, and now I'm finding that with a lot of different watches. The thing that my biggest complaint, and I sort of said this ad nauseum, is to pay like crazy high prices for watches with basically simple or cheap movements in them. That's the thing that fries me, and then trying to hide them. One of the funny things when I was looking at some different instructions on working with a 6498, the examples all had Panerai. They were all 6498s that were from Panerai, and I thought that was awfully funny. So then here these guys are paying $5,000-$6,000.
Yeah, of course, they also put the swan neck regulators in as well, and we won't even get to the 318 or the Brooklyn Bridge, which is
the what now?
Well, the Panerais, of course, they have swan neck regulators. They put a little bit into it, but it's the funny part is that those are the earlier ones that are more iconic now. They've got, like for instance, I've got a base zero. I've got a PAM zero. It's also called a base logo, and that simply has. It's not even under a case. It's not even display case back. It has an ETA. It has the basically the same movement as the 6497, I believe, except it doesn't have a seconds hand.
Okay.
It's just. But those are the ones, even among the Panaristi, that they like. It's the ETA ones that they preferred.
Well, that's I as long as I know what's in a watch, as long as I know what I'm getting, then I don't mind. It's only when they're trying to be clever and trying to say, in fact, well, this is really something great and expensive, and that's why it's worth $5,000 or $6,000, $7,000, up to $10,000 for that. So. Like I said, that's always been my complaint. A lot of people say, "Wow, ETAs are really, pretty good movements," and I don't think it's right that you're bad mouthing ETAs. I've never done that. Simply pointed out is that ETAs are ETAs, and right, yeah, there you go. And,
dead on the money. I mean, I like I said, I haven't had to adjust it once.
Yeah, and this is a clone, a clone of an ETA, sort of a faux ETA. Right. But when you're banging around, if you're taking them apart and putting them back together, it's better to wreck a cheap one than an expensive one, and you learn the same kind of principles. And as I get better at it, I hope to get, I'll start. Oh, by the way, too, from what I understand, is that these guys come without lubrication. The Seagull versions come without lubrication. And so I've been talking to some of the people who are into watchmaking, and they let me know about that. And they said, well, you have a little time before, so I gotta hurry up my schedule and learn about lubrication. My God, I tell you, lubrication is that you got to take the watch apart, and then there are these little points, and they have a thing that looks like a one hair brush that you poke it with just a tad, and you can't. Jesus, I tell you, I don't think thousands of dollars really is justified in a lot of sort of a simple service to get your lubrication squared away. But it's not an easy task to do because you got to disassemble it and then get the right points at just the right amount and the right type. There are different kinds of lubricants that go into that. So it's something that, and so if I'm going to mess something up, it's going to be a $30 job that I'm working with and not an expensive one. And the thing of it is, Clyde, it's having fun. I love looking at my FP Journes. I wouldn't open one of those up any more than I try to. Well, I love flying, but I mean flying without an airplane. Hey, listen, I promised my wife this would be a half hour, and it's sort of gone on a bit after that. So I'm going to have to boogie off, and they're starting to have the pregame shows now too. So
right.
Anyhow,
Well,
hey,
it's
thanks
actually
for being.
It's starting to become finally fall in the flyover states, and so we're getting a break from the relentless heat. Thank you, sweet, merciful Jesus.
Okay, take care.
Be well.